Well, the pictures we saw earlier of the released hostages came at the end of a day full of striking developments. Here are just a few of them. Well, this is the moment the first hostages to be released by Hamas under the deal were transferred from captivity to the Red Cross. It happened in Gaza City. At this point, we can only catch a fleeting glimpse of them, but they appear to be able to walk unaided as they get into the Red Cross vehicle. And we can see a number of what appear to be armed Hamas fighters surrounding them. Well, those pictures emerged sometime after the exchange had taken place, but details were made public. And this is how Israelis who'd gathered in Tel Aviv reacted when they heard the news. And this is the moment the mothers of the three hostages learnt they'd been handed over to the Red Cross. Well, meanwhile, across Gaza, many of the hundreds of thousands of people who were displaced by the fighting have begun returning to their homes, many of which have been destroyed. These pictures show people walking back into the Jabalia area, which was targeted many times in Israeli airstrikes. Israel says it was targeting militants. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, takes us through all today's developments as after 15 months of war, the ceasefire in Gaza began.
In the centre of Gaza City, a show of force by Hamas as they handed the hostages over to the International Red Cross. In the white vehicles, Romi Gonen, Doron Steinbrecher and Emily Damari, a British-Israeli dual citizen, were starting their journey back to freedom. The men and guns were there to send a signal that whatever Israel says or wants, Hamas is still in charge in Gaza. That sight would infuriate Israelis. Israeli TV showed a glimpse of one of the hostages in a pink top, while the whole country was watching and waiting. This is the family of Romi Gonen. This day has been a long time coming. The families and their supporters have campaigned constantly for a deal to get the hostages back. At first light, thousands of Palestinians in Gaza began trying to walk home. This fragile ceasefire started almost 3 hours late. With zero trust on either side, Israel continued its attacks here in Khan Yunis as it waited for the names of the women being released. Gaza Civil Defense, run by Hamas, said 19 more Palestinians were killed by Israel during the delay. Hamas joined the celebrations, trying to claim some kind of victory. The Israelis have destroyed the offensive power Hamas used to attack them 15 months ago. But the Americans say Hamas has nearly as many new recruits as Israel has killed. After so much bloodshed, celebratory gunfire did not make Jana flinch.
May God have mercy on the oppressed and those who have passed, and pity on us who survived. And God willing, everyone will return home.
This celebration in Khan Yunis was filmed by a trusted Palestinian cameraman working for the BBC. Israel does not let international journalists enter Gaza to report freely. Just over the border in Israel is the site of the Nova Music Festival, where Hamas killed more than 380 people on the 7th of October and took 40 hostage. This weekend, with the ceasefire coming, many Israelis made their own pilgrimages, moving quietly around the photos and memorials to those who were killed. A short distance away is another memorial, the festival-goers' cars, hundreds of them destroyed in the attack. Israelis here said they'd wanted a deal in which all the hostages were swapped for Palestinian prisoners at the same time. That's because they believed the war is going to resume. They said it was unavoidable while Hamas still has armed men in Gaza.
They want to kill us. They want to finish us. So what is the good questions? Look. This is the answer. This is what they want. Can we live like this? No.
A ceasefire, by definition, is a compromise between enemies. But since the October attacks, Prime Minister Netanyahu has talked repeatedly about getting all the hostages back through total victory, the complete annihilation of Hamas as a political
a military force. But right now, that is not what the Israeli people are being offered.
Tonight, thousands gathered in the square in Tel Aviv, where the hostage campaign has based itself since the first weeks of the war. It's a night for hope and relief in Israel and Gaza, and some trepidation about what might lie ahead.
I spoke to our correspondent Jonah Fisher, who's at Sheba Hospital on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, where the released hostages are now, and he told us more about the atmosphere there.
It was quite a moment when the helicopter arrived here and then vehicles drove them into the building behind me. Obviously, the media is being kept at arm's length, but we have had footage released by the Israeli authorities of what has been going on inside the hospital behind me. Really, really emotional scenes of Romi, Doron, and of Emily being reunited, not just with their families, because of course their mothers went to meet them as they emerged out of Gaza, but from their friends as well, hugging, lots of singing, crying. You know, this has been a very emotional day here at the hospital.
And there will have been preparations for what they go through next to try and recover from the emotional and the physical burden that they've had in the last 15 months or so.
Yeah, there are clearly physical injuries which are already being addressed. We saw Emily Damari, the British-Israeli national, with bandages on one hand. We know that she was shot as she was taken by Hamas on October the 7th, 2023, and it appears that almost immediately that she came out of Gaza, that was addressed by medics down there, and no doubt will be looked at again here. We also know that Romi has most likely got injuries which need to be addressed. But in terms of their general health, I mean, all three of them were walking and they seemed clearly in buoyant moods. In terms of what this means for them psychologically, and there will be psychologists here available to them to work with them, they will have to begin to try and address and to work through the trauma that they have no doubt experienced over the last 15 months, being held captive in Gaza, possibly in tunnels, being hidden away. We don't know yet how they've been treated by their Hamas captors, but from the accounts of other hostages, perhaps not very well. They may have, and almost certainly have, had a miserable time for that period in captivity. So there will be physical and psychological things that will be being addressed by the team here at the Sheba Medical Center. This is a huge hospital, one of the biggest in the Middle East. So they will have all the specialists that they need on hand to start the process of coming to terms with what's happened to them.
And these clearly are the first three hostages to be released. Tell us about the process now and how long this is going to take.
Yeah, it's a complicated process and it's in many phases. Effectively, the way it works is that a group of Israeli hostages are released, and in return, Palestinian prisoners and detainees are released as well. So today we had 90 Palestinian prisoners being released, 30 for each of the Israeli hostages that were released. There will be a series of releases over the following weeks. This is a 6-week temporary ceasefire. So during that period, there will be 33 hostages released by Hamas if everything goes according to plan. They are children, women, the elderly, the sick and the injured. And we're not expecting all of the 33 to have survived this and to still be alive. So Israel is being prepared for the fact that as well as live hostages being released, it's likely that in some of the releases that followed, it's going to be the bodies of Israeli hostages being returned as well as hostages who've survived.
And some of this is clearly difficult for the Israelis because these are some of the Palestinian prisoners who are being released are people that they would view as a serious potential risk to Israel. Talk us through how people are receiving that side of things, the kind of the concept of the prisoner exchange.
But this is something which Israel has gone through in the past, the negotiations and the release of Gilad Shalit, a soldier who was captured and held in Gaza and then released, led to the release of more than 1,000 prisoners, many of whom went on to commit crimes. Indeed, one of them, Yahya Sinwar, became the leader of Hamas in Gaza. So people here are acutely aware that in return for getting these hostages back, they are releasing people who have done bad things to Israelis. People on the long list, not people who are released today, but set to be released. There are people who have murdered Israelis, who've planted bombs that have blown up multiple Israelis at the same time. So yes, that is the other side of this, the price which is being paid for each one of these hostages, and the potential risk for the future, if you like, that Israel is creating by letting these people with a record of violence free.
Jonah Fisher there. Well, as we've heard, among those released is British-Israeli dual national Emily Damari. The 28-year-old's family have roots in Beckenham in southeast London. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning has been speaking to some of her family.
Well, here in North London there has been some joy amongst the family and supporters of Emily Damari that she has been released, tempered by the fact that there are still hostages being held. There's been a gathering to celebrate her release and also to call for the release of other hostages. And I'm joined by a cousin of Emily Damari, Tony Moss. Tony, just give me your reaction to the release of Emily this evening.
We're just overjoyed, lost for words, can't quite believe it. Didn't think it was going to happen and it should be first out. We just can't quite believe it, but we're also sad. This is just the beginning. We need to get the other hostages out. We could be happy today for Emily and Mandy and the family and the other hostages that have been released, but this is just the beginning. We've got to get all the hostages out.
What does it mean to you after this long ordeal that Emily is now home?
Oh, just huge relief, huge relief. Just there's been an anxiety for 471 days, a huge anxiety that we're all carrying around with us, and we can let that go now, but only in respect of Emily. But we've got to get the other hostages out. I know I keep saying that, but we do.
And what were your emotions when you heard the news and when you saw the pictures?
I broke down when I saw the pictures. Only once Emily was in the hands of her mother, Mandy, because you saw how fragile it was when they were in Gaza, surrounded by Hamas terrorists and mobs. That was still extremely fragile. Anything could have happened. But once she was in the hands, back over the border and in the hands of her mother where she should have been, then just huge relief. Then I broke down in tears.
And that photo of Emily smiling with her mum, Mandy.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Even though you saw she's got some fingers missing, that she was shot on the day she was taken. They shot her dog dead and shot her fingers. But she's still smiling. She's smiling. She's an amazing spirit, Emily. And may that be hope for the other hostages and their families.
And what has been the discussion in the family chat group with Mandy?
There's only one thing under discussion, and this morning, first thing when we heard the news, Mandy sent a message to the family WhatsApp group that she's packed a bag and she's waiting to hear where and when, but she won't believe it until she's got her in her arms. She refused to believe until it happened.
And what was the message when Emily was released?
Just she's here. You know, Mandy's got this special thing with her daughter Emily about a hug for 40 seconds, because it takes 40 seconds for the dopamine to be released. So she just was waiting for that hug for 471 days. That's a long time. But now we need to hug the other hostages. We need to get them out.
And for you and your family tonight, a bit of relief, a lot of relief, really.
Just huge relief. Huge relief for us.
What have the last months, more than a year, felt like?
Just hugely stressful. Just anxiety, stress, turmoil. Ending for us now in respect of Emily, but not for those other families. So bring them home.
And what will your message be to Mandy, to Emily in that family WhatsApp group this evening?
We're going to carry on fighting, and all the people you see around you, the people that have so many people to thank, the tireless work that they do, putting ribbons up, balloons, singing at Spurs, talking to politicians, writing to politicians. There is so much more work to be done, and we will be continuing to do that until all those hostages are delivered back home.
And those pictures, it seemed that Emily was in, it seemed on the surface, pretty good spirits.
No, it's just the start. Who knows what mental condition she's in, but she's alive. She was smiling. But this is the beginning, and thank God she's home to her mum and her brothers. But I have no idea what condition she's really in, and that's why she's gone to hospital, and I'm sure they'll take amazing care of her, and it will give hope to all those other families.
Well, some really positive emotions there felt by Emily Damari's relations and supporters here who have been out with yellow balloons, yellow ribbons, been at Spurs matches. These are the first 3 hostages to be released, and the hope here from all the supporters is that there will be more.
Lucy Manning reporting. Well, Palestinians have begun to return to Rafa in Gaza, where they've been making their way through the rubble. Here's what some of them had to say about the ceasefire.
It is an indescribable feeling for Rafa and the entire nation. At first in Rafa, we see the destruction we have not seen before. We were talking about a genocide, but it is more than genocide. May God be with our people and grant them patience and have mercy on our martyrs and heal our wounded. We hope that this truce continues, and this is the end of the bloodshed, the torrent of blood, which our people paid a heavy price for. Our people gave a lot.
I entered this area nearly 20 to 25 days before the Jewish forces came here. The houses were there where the people are standing. Our hearts were just aching once we saw the scenes today. Someone like my father, who's 75 years old, he'll get a stroke, he'll fall, and who will compensate him? My cousin who was martyred, my brother who died, my cousin, my brother's house, my sister's house, my cousin's house, the neighbour's house. Who will compensate us?
Well, the ceasefire means that aid deliveries are increasing. The World Food Programme sent this video of trucks moving across into Gaza from Rafa. BBC Arabic's Abdelbasser Hassan is on the Egyptian side of the Rafa crossing.
This is Rafah crossing from the Egyptian side, and it is the first day of the implementation of the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. The first 8 trucks have been seen entering Gaza this morning since the ceasefire came into effect. The United Nations Food Agency says its 8 trucks have entered into Gaza via 2 crossings, Zikim in the north and Kerem Shalom in the south. Other 8 trucks have been seen entering the strip via the Rafah crossing. The first 8 trucks carried life-saving wheat, flour, and ready-to-eat food parcels for people in the desperate need. The World Food Programme says on X, Gaza relies heavily on aid for food, and in recent weeks, just 40 trucks of aid were getting on average, while pre-conflict around 500 trucks entered Gaza daily. The ceasefire deal required 608 trucks to enter each day.
Let's bring you live pictures now from Offa prison, where we're expecting the release of Palestinian prisoners as part of this exchange. We're expecting around 90 Palestinian prisoners to be released, and that hasn't yet happened. What we understand is happening is that the Red Cross is still examining those Palestinian prisoners inside Offa prison. And Israel is due to release more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners over the course of the 42-day or 6-week initial ceasefire, according to the terms of the agreement. And starting with those 90 on Sunday in exchange for the 3 Israeli hostages that we've been talking about who have now been released by Hamas and who are back inside Israel in the hospital, as you saw earlier. But it seems that initial exchange of the Palestinian prisoners has not yet happened.